Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Steelers Social Studies. All right, so we're covering the forming of our government, and we're talking about a couple of important groups of people, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and what type of effect that they had at the founding of our nation. Some of the conflicts that they had, some of the compromises that they had to agree upon to be able to make it so our nation moves forward. So we're going to continue that idea between the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists, but we're going to get into some more of their ideas, and two of the most prominent Federalists and Anti-Federalists we're going to cover about them is going to be Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. So following the end of the American Revolution, the United States struggled to define its foreign policy. Right? George Washington is trying to figure out what we're going to do with the foreign nations. What are we going to do with Britain? What are we going to do with France? So we're trying to figure out what to do with our foreign policy. We're going to try to determine how to implement it. And we're going to try to maintain necessary commercial ties or trading ties with Europe without becoming embroiled in any European conflicts and politics. If you remember what I've said when we covered this in the past, Britain and France have been at war for a long, long time. And now the United States steps in, and now we're kind of trying to be friendly with Britain and also trying to be friendly with France. So what are we going to do? It's hard for the United States to be friendly with one and not the other, or with both, because those two hate each other. So these differences over the foreign policy became a basis for the founding of political parties in our nation, as these debates pitted the Federalists, led by the Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton, against the Jeffersonians, the Anti-Federalists, represented by Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson. Now, the Federalists, led by Hamilton, supported the development of a strong international commerce system, which is trade, and with it the creation of a navy capable of protecting U.S. merchant vessels. If you remember what I said when we covered the poor economy after the Revolutionary War, Britain blockaded all those ports in the Atlantic and the Caribbean, and when the U.S. tried to trade, pirates attacked their ships. So now they're saying that we need to have a navy to protect our merchant vessels. The Jeffersonians favored the expansion across the vast continent that the new republic occupied, meaning that Hamilton wanted to trade to the east with European countries, and Jefferson wanted to move westward and let the farmers move westward and create their own type of money and commerce and trade. So the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists disagreed over U.S. policy toward political events in Europe as well. After the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789, the Federalists distrusted France and encouraged closer commercial ties with England. So they were more worried about trading with England than they were trying to help France in their revolution, even though France helped us. While the Jeffersonians preferred to support the new French Republic. So Jefferson wants to help France, Hamilton wants to stick with Britain, and this will turn around and hurt Adams in his presidency. So conflict in Europe between France, Britain, and Spain in the 1790s resulted in President George Washington declaring American neutrality. What's neutrality mean? It means that we're not going to gain either side on this part of the war between Britain, France, and Spain. We are going to stay neutral. Just like a car stays neutral, doesn't go anywhere, that's our plan. The Jay Treaty with Britain in 1794 and the Pinckney Treaty with Spain in 1795 tried to preserve this neutrality. And in his farewell address, Washington promoted a vision of American diplomacy that involved no entangling alliances with European powers. When George Washington set up his first cabinet, he must have known the political stance of his Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, and his Secretary of the State, Thomas Jefferson, the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. These debates must have caused wars in the cabinet, driving Washington absolutely berserk. And we're going to go through The differences between the Federalist Alexander Hamilton and the anti-Federalist Thomas Jefferson on topics such as their supporters, their view on education, location of their supporters, their idea of the central government, the economy, the French Revolution, and the creation of a national bank. So let's start with Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton was a Federalist. That was his political party. His supporters were mostly the wealthy, the merchants, the bankers, the traders. The education of his supporters were mostly well-educated men. The location of most of his supporters were in the New England area along the coasts. His belief in the central government is that he wanted a strong central government controlled by the elite with high voter qualifications. His view on the Constitution was this: he was a loose constitutionist. He had a loose construction of the Constitution. And what that means is Hamilton believed that he could do things because the Constitution did not say that he could not do it. He was a loophole guy, trying to find those loopholes. He believed that the U.S. economy should be based on manufacturing, trade, commerce, and finance. His view on the French Revolution is that he didn't want to fight in the French Revolution. He didn't want to join. He was more worried about trade with England. What was his view on the federal government assuming the state's debts from the Revolutionary War? He wanted it to happen. He felt that if the government assumed the state's debts from the war, it would give the government a line of credit, making the United States a good trading partner. And what was his view on the national bank? He wanted to create a national bank and sell stocks to the citizens in the bank. He felt that it was authorized by the Constitution to be able to do so. So now let's move on to his opposite, we'll say. Thomas Jefferson, the anti-federalist. What was his political party? Being an anti-federalist wasn't necessarily a political party. Thomas Jefferson winds up creating the Democratic Republican Party with his partner James Madison. The supporters of Jefferson, these Jeffersonians, they were farmers. They were shopkeepers. Their education, they weren't really very educated. They did not have that higher level of education, college education. They were farmers. They lived in the back country, the interior regions of our country, in the very rural areas doing farming. His belief in the central government is that the central government should be weak. The states' rights and the common man can govern themselves and vote. So Thomas Jefferson did not want a strong central government. Thomas Jefferson's view on the Constitution. Now this is tricky because Thomas Jefferson is going to shoot himself in the foot on this one. He is what you call a strict constitutionalist. He had a strict construction of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson believed that you can only do what the Constitution told you can do. The only problem with Thomas Jefferson is that the Constitution did not say he could buy the Louisiana Territory, but he did. So that type of thing is going to haunt Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson believed, again, that we should move westward and that the economy should be based on farming. It's a farming economy, small farmers, an agrarian nation. Jefferson's view on the French Revolution, again, he wanted to help. He thought that since the French helped us during our revolution, we should help them on theirs. His view on the government assuming the state's debts from the Revolutionary War, Jefferson felt that the states did not have war debt, or the states that did not have war debt should have to pay the debt of the states that incurred debt during the Revolutionary War. And what was his view on the national bank? We can just look at it this way. If Hamilton wanted it, Jefferson hated it. So he opposed the creation of a national bank. He felt it wouldn't help the farmers at all. He felt it was not authorized by the Constitution at all. Again, that's going to come back and haunt him with that being a strict constitutionalist. So who wins? Who wins on the assumption of the state's debts? Well, state's debts are assumed by the federal government with the Compromise of 1790. Madison and Jefferson would support the assumption of the debts if the United States capital moved from New York City to Washington, D.C. on the Potomac River. And we're going to cover that next. That's called the dinner party compromise. And the creation of the national bank. Who wins that? Does Hamilton win? Well, the National Bank was created in 1791 that would deal with the debts of the United States, and it would have many wealthy private investors that would have a say in the American economy. So if you have to look at our economy today, I would almost suggest that Hamilton, you could say, came out on top of this one. He was the Secretary of the Treasury. He knew how the economy needed to work, and he worked it the way it needed to be worked. I'll see you next time.